This is the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation.
Precisely 6:45. This is the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation. News edited by Lal Malavarachi and read by Sharifa Tahir. Headlines. Sri Lanka is nearing the 10 million mark for the second dose of the coronavirus vaccine. The government has taken over rice stocks belonging to large-scale rice mill owners in Polonnaruwa. A discussion between milk powder companies and the Ministry of Trade will be held today. Over 74,122 active COVID cases are currently under medical care. U.S. Ambassador Lena B. Teplidge stresses that Sri Lanka's economy can bounce back. In foreign news, a new order begins under the Taliban's governance in Afghanistan. In sports, the first T20 match between Sri Lanka and South Africa will be played tomorrow. We move on to local news in detail now. Sri Lanka was nearing the 10 million mark for the second dose of the coronavirus vaccine yesterday, with over 9.7 million persons over 30 getting the full 2 doses. Nearly 13 million people over 30 have got the first dose, while 84% of people over 30 have got the second dose as well. Meanwhile, nearly 45% of the 20 to 30s population of 3.3 million have got the first COVID-19 vaccine dose. The vaccination program for this age group is currently underway at centres island-wide. However, anyone over 30 who has not yet been vaccinated can still walk in and get the vaccine. The number of PCR and antigen tests has exceeded 5 million by yesterday, with an average of 11,000 daily tests island-wide. Sri Lanka has received more than 27 million vaccine doses to date, with Sinopharm leading at 22 million doses. More vaccine doses are expected in the coming days. The government has taken over rice stocks which were in warehouses belonging to large-scale rice mill owners in Polonnaruwa on the instructions of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa yesterday. Accordingly, the rice stocks belonging to Nipuna Latpandura, Araliya, Hiru, New Ratna and Surya rice mills were taken over by the government under the direct supervision of Essential Services Commissioner Major General Senarath Niwunhalla and the Consumer Affairs Authority Chairman Major General Retired Shanta Dissanayake. The rice stocks were taken over at the guaranteed prices announced by the government and transported to Satosa outlets. The government aims to release these stocks to the consumers as soon as possible. A discussion between milk powder companies and the Ministry of Trade will be held today. They will focus attention on easing the shortage of milk powder in the local market. There are allegations of milk powder being hoarded, while in the midst of proposals being made to increase milk powder prices. Milk powder companies have sought permission from the Consumer Affairs Authority to increase prices. Sri Lanka's monthly consumption of milk powder is around 6,500 metric tons. The annual expenditure on importing milk powder to the country is around $360 million. This is the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation giving you the news.
Get a personal loan for your marriage, education or housing within 24 hours with People's Bank Digital Banking.
Continuing with more stories here at home. The Director General of Health Services on Tuesday confirmed 185 more fatalities due to COVID-19. The new deaths have pushed the official death toll from the virus outbreak in Sri Lanka to 10,689. The latest victims include 102 males and 83 females. As many as 140 deaths were reported among elderly people who are aged above 60 years. Meanwhile, another 2,917 persons have tested positive for COVID-19 in Sri Lanka, moving the total number of confirmed cases reported in the country to 474,780. As many as 389,969 recoveries have been confirmed in Sri Lanka since the outbreak of the pandemic. The epidemiology unit's data showed that 74,122 active cases are currently under medical care. An all-night Pirit chanting program centering historical viharas and 135 Pirivanas will be held today. The Pirit is chanted with the sole objective of eliminating the COVID pandemic from this world. State Ministry for National Heritage has organized this program. This program will be aired live over the City FM of SLBC from 9:30 p.m. onwards. That's local news.
Get a personal loan for your marriage, education or housing within 24 hours with People's Bank Digital Banking. People's Bank Digital Banking, your ultimate convenience.
A mother knows the pain of each member of the family. SLBC, the trusted relief for aches and pains.
An effective therapy for relief from cold, sneezing, flu, headaches, swelling due to toothaches, rheumatic, discomforts, and muscular aches and pains. SLBC, the Vidya Mahatmya in every home.
The main news story is brought to you by SLBC Vidya Mahatmya.
Another main news story, outgoing U.S. Ambassador to Sri Lanka Elena B. Teplitz says that there is a growing appetite among Sri Lankans for economic and societal innovation which have got stronger over the last 3 years. In an interview with Awarelock Initiative, she said Sri Lanka needs an outward-focused national economic vision to address the economic woes introduced by the COVID-19 pandemic. Sri Lanka does have a history of economic resilience and it has got a lot of innovation. The country is just talking about sort of innovation on the small scale, but there is a big-scale innovation in the apparel sector where Sri Lankan business owners have really made a name for themselves globally. The U.S. ambassador added that Sri Lankan entrepreneurs, even during the pandemic, have shown that they can still fill niches, build delivery services from scratch, or do other creative things. But that innovation alone is not enough to make the economy prosper. You have got the appetite, now you have got to have a facilitative environment. And she says she thinks that greater economic success is definitely possible if the right policies are in place to facilitate exports, to encourage entrepreneurism, and to attract foreign direct investment.
The main news story was brought to you by SLBC Vidya Mahatmya. Brush your teeth twice a day for healthy teeth and gums. Supiriviki and Kakulu, your trusted brands in oral care for many years.
Supiriviki Ayurvedic toothpaste for adults. Kakulu Ayurvedic toothpaste for kids. 9 Ayurvedic ingredients of Supiriviki will protect your teeth and strengthen your gums. Supiriviki and Kakulu, products from SLBC.
And now in Watch Light.
The COVID vaccination program conducted by the Ministry of Health will be carried out in 416 vaccination centers in all districts in the country. For further details of the nearest vaccination centers and type of vaccines administered can be obtained by visiting the official website of the Health Ministry, health.gov.lk.
World News.
World News headlines. A new order begins under the Taliban's governance in Afghanistan. Philippines President Rodrigo Duterte to stand as Vice President. Fossil fuels must stay underground, scientists say. World News in detail. Taliban leader Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar promises that they're working to establish an inclusive government that represents all the people of Afghanistan. He said this when he recently arrived in Kabul to start talks aimed at forming a leadership to move the movement from guns to government. We would like to live peacefully, vowed Taliban spokesperson Zabihullah Mujahid at the first press conference in the capital after the Taliban suddenly swept into power on 15th August. We don't want any internal enemies and any external enemies. Meanwhile, dozens of women in Kabul and the northeastern Afghan province of Badakhshan have protested against the formation of an all-male interim Taliban government to rule Afghanistan. Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte has accepted his party's nomination to run as vice president in the next election. The constitution bars Mr. Duterte from a second term, and rivals have accused him of seeking to cling on to power. But Mr. Duterte claimed that he is driven by love of his country. There has been speculation he would seek a politically weak running mate in order to rule from the number 2 role. Finally, on world news, almost 60% of oil and gas reserves and 90% of coal must remain in the ground to keep global warming below 1.5 Celsius, scientists say. The forecast is based on close analysis of global energy supply and demand. It is a bleak but realistic assessment of what the science tells us is indeed needed, the researchers say. They have painted a scenario of the future that leaves much less room for fossil fuels to be extracted than previously estimated. That's on World News. Moving on to development news. Sinopharm Group of China, one of the leading COVID-19 vaccine manufacturers in the world, has once again expressed interest in setting up a vaccine refilling plant in Sri Lanka. This was disclosed when the chairman of Sinopharm Group, Liu Jinzheng, and the senior management group met Ambassador to Sri Lanka in China, Dr. Palita Kohana, recently. Sinopharm Group said, when a vaccine refilling plant is set up in Sri Lanka, it can take advantage of Sri Lanka's favorable trade access in the region and beyond, and engage in exports as well. The chairman said that Sinopharm will continue to collaborate with Sri Lanka and supply vaccines. Moving on to sports news now. Charit Asalanka made huge strides in the International Cricket Council player rankings for batsmen following a tremendous one-day international series against South Africa. The 24-year-old left-hander enjoyed a wonderful series as he ended up as the highest run-getter in the series with a total of 196 runs from 3 innings. His performance in the series against South Africa also saw his jumping up 122 places to the 66th position in the latest ICC rankings. In the meantime, the first T20 match between Sri Lanka and South Africa will be played tomorrow as a night encounter. The match will start at 8 p.m. local time tomorrow. With a series win in ODI, Sri Lanka is expected to put up a good performance against Proteas in R. Premadasa Stadium. That's on sports news.
Contributory deposit of 1,000 rupees from NSB when your child enters grade 1. Open a Hapan Children's Service account for your kid today. Higher interest. Conditions apply.
Business News. Sponsored by National Savings Bank. The safest place for your money.
The Lagoon Restaurant, a Cinnamon Grand Colombo, was recently featured in the world's 50 best restaurants, a globally recognized restaurant listing program, for their rich ambience, diversity of freshest seafood and variety of culinary experiences. The Lagoon Restaurant is popularly known among local and international guests as an exquisite dining venue that captures the essence of a lively atmosphere at seafood markets as the restaurant lays out the freshest catch of the day, allowing customers to pick their favorite and have the chefs prepare it in any culinary style of choice right before their eyes. That's on Business News.
Business News. Sponsored by National Savings Bank. The safest place for your money.
Contributory deposit of 1,000 rupees from NSB when your child enters grade 1. Open a Hapan Children's Service account for your kid today. Higher interest. Conditions apply.
And on economic news, Sri Lanka has welcomed 5,040 tourists in August 2021, up from zero a year earlier, as the country manages the coronavirus pandemic and tries to keep hard-hit tourist businesses alive. August arrivals were the highest so far this year. Arrivals have crawled up from 1,497 in May to 1,614 in June, 2,429 in July and 5,040 in August. Sri Lanka is also giving extended for digital nomad visa tourists who can stay for several months working online in their home countries.
Weather report.
A few showers in Sabragamu, western and northwestern provinces, and in Kandy, Noorali, Gaul and Matra districts. Showers or thunder showers may occur at a few places in the Uva province and in Batticaloa and Ampara districts, particularly in the evening or night. Mainly fair weather will prevail elsewhere. That's our weather update, and back to the headlines. Sri Lanka is nearing the 10 million mark for the second dose of the coronavirus vaccine. The government has taken over rice stocks belonging to large-scale rice mill owners in Polonnaruwa. A discussion between milk powder companies and the Ministry of Trade will be held today. Over 74,122 active COVID cases are currently under medical care. U.S. Ambassador Lena B. Teplitz stresses that Sri Lanka's economy can bounce back. In foreign news, a new order begins under the Taliban's governance in Afghanistan. Sports, the first T20 match between Sri Lanka and South Africa will be played tomorrow. And with that, we conclude this bulletin of news.